Earlier this year, it was announced there is a multi-year partnership between World Wrestling Entertainment and TNA Wrestling. As part of this relationship, several WWE NXT superstars cross over into WWE's now partner, TNA Wrestling, and several TNA Wrestling stars cross over into WWE NXT, and occasionally on main roster PLEs. But as part of this relationship over the last couple of years, we have seen a couple of TNA Wrestling stars actually sign with WWE once their contract with TNA Wrestling has expired. What other names could be set to jump over permanently to WWE? We'll let you know in this countdown video. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of stories to get into. Before we get started in today's countdown video, a reminder, you can join the WN365 roster. All you have to do is click that join button. You can also click the link in the video description. Also, there will be a QR code on the sidebar. You can scan that, you can join, you can get your badges, your emojis, and your exclusive members-only content, such as gaming streams coming soon. In addition to that, whilst you're looking at the sidebar, take a look and make a note of every single upcoming watch-along and post-show that we have coming here on the channel, including AEW Dynasty tomorrow. We've got a post-show and a watch-along for that, both nights of WrestleMania, that being Saturday and Sunday, as well as select episodes of Raw and SmackDown with more details set to be confirmed too. Now, when it comes to this countdown video, let's talk about which TNA Wrestling stars could be on their way to WWE. Of course, earlier this year, it was announced that WWE and TNA Wrestling are in a multi-year partnership, which sees several WWE superstars cross over to TNA and several TNA Wrestling stars cross over into WWE. But this relationship has been going on actually for longer than just this year in 2025. It actually began in earnest last year. And during that, we saw stars like Jordynne Grace actually cameo in WWE at the time. Was the TNA Knockouts World Champion. Subsequently, her contract expired with TNA Wrestling and she permanently signed with WWE, leading to a lot of people to speculate, could there be other names currently under contract to TNA that could be on their way to WWE in the future once their contracts expire? Let's begin with the first name in this countdown video, that being Joe Hendry. This is one I think that's largely expected. He was one of the first names to cross over as part of this working relationship with WWE and TNA. Of course, really the first one was Jordynne Grace, and that really kicked off in the Women's Royal Rumble last year. But it was Jordynne Grace and then Joe Hendry. Joe Hendry made multiple appearances on the WWE NXT brand. His actual debut on NXT was one of the most viewed videos of 2024 overall, and WWE really began to recognize and see just the viral power and social media power that Joe Hendry has, and the organic groundswell of support he has on social media and also inside of arenas with fans singing his songs, of course having great matches and great promo segments and great concerts as well. And Joe Hendry has continued over and over and over again to appear on WWE TV, including at one point challenging for the WWE NXT Championship in a losing effort against Ethan Page. Now, during this time, his popularity was also increasing with TNA Wrestling. Subsequently, he won the TNA World Championship, defeating Nick Nemeth, and now, as of the time recording this video, is still the TNA World Champion. His contract with TNA Wrestling reportedly expires at the end of 2025, so as of right now, he's still got time left on his deal, but a lot of people are looking at this as an inevitability. The moment that Joe Hendry does become a free agent, or maybe even before, a bit like in the Jordynne Grace case, of course, because actually WWE, because of this relationship with TNA, were able to talk with Jordynne Grace prior to actually this announcement being made, that her contract was going to expire. And this could be the same thing with Joe Hendry, that actually WWE could have talks with Joe Hendry prior to his TNA contract expiring. So effectively, he goes from one contract and one company straight to another one. So most people are expecting maybe at the end of this year, beginning of next year, that Joe Hendry will put pen to paper on an official WWE contract and leave TNA Wrestling. But still, he's got time left on his deal. But this one would be an easy pick, wouldn't it? That if you had to say which names are on their way to WWE once their TNA contracts expire, the first name, ironically, would be the current world champion, that being Joe Hendry. Now let's move on and talk about Moose, another name that has crossed over recently to WWE NXT, that being the current, at the time recording, X Division champion Moose. Moose, of course, has been with TNA Wrestling for a really long time, TNA/Impact Wrestling, of course, and he's pretty much done everything there is to do in TNA Wrestling. Of course, a former world champion in TNA Wrestling, a current X Division champion. He was the first ever Impact Grand Champion as well. So he's pretty much done it all when it comes to TNA. Now, a couple of times his contract has come up with TNA Wrestling. Reportedly, he has held talks with WWE on a couple of occasions, and they passed for whatever reason, maybe because of issues in the past when it comes to Moose. In addition to that, he was loyal to TNA Wrestling and at one point was one of the highest paid talents on the roster. And because of that, as I mentioned, he's done a lot in TNA Wrestling, whether it's to be a two-time TNA World Champion. In addition to that, of course, he was the X Division Champion, Grand Champion. He's won the Call Your Shot Gauntlet. He's, again, pretty much, apart from being the Tag Team Champion, done it all. But as part of this crossover with WWE and NXT, this year, he began appearing on the NXT brand. He made his surprise WWE debut in February 18th of this year on NXT, facing off against NXT champion Obafemi. He teased a match between the two. He also had a confrontation with NXT Heritage Cup champion Lexis King. He defended his TNA X Division Championship on an episode of WWE NXT. Now, again, as I mentioned, this led to a match against Obafemi for the NXT Championship at Roadblock, which took place at the theater at Madison Square Garden. Moose failed to win the title from Femi at that time, but subsequently, reports came out suggesting that WWE and backstage officials at NXT were very impressed with the performance, the reaction, and the match that Moose put on against Obafemi. In addition to that, we saw multiple appearances of Obafemi on TNA Impact 2. And Moose has really opened up that upon the expiration of his TNA wrestling contract, it is likely that he's going to leave TNA. The reason is because, of course, he's pretty much done it all. He's done it all in TNA wrestling. He's been with this company for a really, really long time right now. I mean, he joined TNA back in, 2016? So he's been with the company close to a decade right now, and it just feels like there's not much left to do, and maybe he wants to make that next step when it comes to jumping over to WWE. As far as when his contract expires, well, it's kind of difficult to know. I mean, he says that he has a 5-year contract, and he's expected to, and he said this in 2024, so he's still with the company for several years, but of course, anything's possible. Contracts can change, or he can come to certain agreements with the company, but it does feel like eventually, sooner rather than later, Moose is going to end up signing with WWE, and his appearances on NXT actually maybe were a precursor to that. What about Masha Slamovich? Another name we've seen crossover onto WWE NXT television. A couple of times we've seen Masha Slamovich, of course, appear in the crowd as part of, on NXT, as part of the working relationship with TNA Wrestling and with WWE. Now, largely, her interactions with WWE NXT superstars have actually come on TNA Impact. We've seen her defend her TNA Knockouts World Championship against the likes of Cora Jade as well. Sacrifice that match took place in which she defeated Cora Jade to win the retain the TNA Knockouts World Championship. As I mentioned, she is the current TNA Knockouts World Champion. She defeated Jordan Grace to win the championship for the first time at Bound for Glory back in 2024. And of course, she is still a very young wrestler. She still is only 26 years old at the time recording this video. So she still has plenty of career ahead of her. But you do feel like, given her age profile and given how already competent she is in the ring, it does feel like, doesn't it, that she is going to be one of those names that's going to just only get better and continue to develop over time. Now, TNA actually announced earlier on this year, right at the beginning of this year in January, that they had re-signed Masha Slamovich to a contract. We don't know all of the details when it comes to how long she signed for, if it's a multi-year contract, if it's just a one-year contract, if it's anything like that. So we'll have to wait and see just indeed how long she is under a deal for. But given her age, given her youth, and already her experience and success in TNA wrestling, you feel like she exactly fits the type of profile that WWE would look to recruit for and then develop further at the Performance Center. So don't be too surprised if we see more Masha Slamovich appearances on WWE television, and eventually Slamovich put pen to paper with World Wrestling Entertainment. Penultimate person who could eventually join WWE is Mike Santana. Now, what a gamble for Mike Santana when it comes to his career. Mike Santana, of course, he was a name in the early days of AEW. Before that, of course, he was Santana and Ortiz, Proud and Powerful, LAX in Impact Wrestling as part of their tag team, and did very, very well. Was very successful in Impact from 2017 to 2019. But when their contracts came up at the time, there was a bit of a bidding war between WWE and AEW. Where were Santana and Ortiz going to go? Ultimately, they went to All Elite Wrestling and initially had great success there. Of course, members of the Inner Circle, Chris Jericho's faction, was involved in big matches, big segments, big moments for a long time. But that eventually fizzled out. And after it fizzled out, what happened to Mike Santana is what happened to a lot of people on the AEW roster, which is not too much going on. Largely not really doing that much. Of course, he was out of action for a really long time. He suffered a really bad knee injury, and because of that, he was out of action for close to a year. Eventually, he did make his way back to AEW, and reportedly during that time, he'd had a falling out with Ortiz, and that was centered around how they were being used on television. Ortiz was reportedly of the mindset of, look, we've got a good thing going here. Even if we're not being used all the time, we're under good contracts. Yes, we're not being used on TV all the time, but we're getting paid and we're in a big company. Mike Santana's point of view was, no, we need to leave. We're not being utilized right. We need to go to a place where maybe we could earn less money, but we can be on television more often. We can prove ourselves. We can get some buzz, and eventually we can take a step back to take several steps forward. They went their separate ways. Once his contract expired with AEW, he made the jump over to TNA Wrestling. And it's been a massive success since his return to the company. He's had fantastic matches against the likes of Steve Macklin. He's also had feuds and matches against the likes of Jake Something. A really exciting feud with Josh Alexander. Of course, he was actually the person who had Josh Alexander's final match, or one of his final matches on pay-per-view in TNA Wrestling. Of course, this was at Genesis earlier this year in an I Quit match. After the match, Josh Alexander shook the hand of Mike Santana and quit TNA. He did have a couple more matches after that, but he was spoken glowing terms of Mike Santana, saying that during his tenure with the company, Josh Alexander felt like he was Mr. TNA and was carrying the company on his back and was not necessarily the locker room leader, but certainly an established standard that people had to follow of that's what you have to do when you step into a TNA ring. It's that level of commitment. It's that level of work rate. And he said that he felt like Mike Santana was that guy. And certainly as someone that had to take a gamble on themselves, bet on themselves, leave a big contract in a big company and turn into a single star. Of course, he was a tag team wrestler previously. That's a big risk, and it certainly has paid off. Now, he has never been in WWE. He's been in AEW. He's been in TNA Wrestling. He's 34 years old, so he's absolutely in the prime of his career. And you do feel like the next step and the next evolution for Mike Santana, once his TNA contract does expire, would to go to WWE. Now, where he would go immediately, would he go to the main roster? Would he go to NXT? You do feel like that he would probably end up in NXT initially, but we'll have to wait and see as far as how long his contract lasts for. He signed with the company, TNA Wrestling, in April of 2024, so we don't know how long his deal is, if it's a 2-year deal, a 3-year deal, or anything like that. Time will tell. It could be that his contract expires at the end of this year. We just don't have that kind of info, but it will be interesting to see if Mike Santana at any point as the year progresses does cross over onto WWE NXT, or if we see NXT stars cross over onto TNA Impact and they have matches against Mike Santana. And finally, other names that could possibly leave TNA Wrestling, sign with WWE, are, of course, the Hardy Boyz. The Hardy Boyz, they've participated in this crossover between WWE and TNA Wrestling. Of course, the Hardy Boyz are best known for their time in WWE in the late 90s into the 2000s. Of course, one of the greatest tag teams of all time. TLC, ladder matches, Team Extreme, obviously singles careers. Jeff Hardy being one of the most popular singles acts in the entire company around sort of 2007 to 2009. Multiple-time WWE champion Matt Hardy, former United States champion, ECW champion. They really have done it all. Now, of course, they've had their ups and downs with WWE, their personal issues with WWE. They came back to WWE in 2017 after being one of the most wildly popular acts in TNA at the time and actually kind of keeping that company alive with some of the things they were doing with the Broken Universe. Came back to WWE, came back and maybe wasn't living up to what people had expected of them. They then did singles stuff. We had Woken Matt Hardy. We had Jeff Hardy as a singles talent. They left at different times. Of course, Matt left when his contract expired in 2020, went over to AEW, and people thought he was going to be Broken Matt Hardy again, and he was a little bit, but then there was the Hardy Family Office, Big Money Matt, and just never really kind of got going there. Then Jeff was having issues, left WWE, was released, went to AEW, and people thought, right, we're going to see the Hardy Boyz again. They're going to have these great matches. But of course, because of the issues that Jeff Hardy was having, there was arrests and there was rehab, and AEW never really had the trust, and I suppose rightfully so, in Jeff Hardy because of what happened there. Because at the time, They were just days away from winning the AEW World Tag Team Championships when all of this kind of stuff happened. So eventually, they both leave AEW when their contracts expire, and they go to TNA. And what they've done is really rebuild their reputation once again in TNA wrestling. They've had great matches. They're probably moving physically the best that they have in years. They've been working with a lot of younger talent. Jeff Hardy looks better than he's looked in a long time. And because of that, they've become more trustworthy and they've become more sort of bankable again, as not necessarily this old tag team that can't really work anymore and you never know what you're going to get. They've become a bit more consistent. They're now, of course, currently the TNA World Tag Team Champions. And because of this working relationship, they've started to appear on WWE programming. They appeared on the February 25th episode of NXT. At Roadblock, they successfully defended the TNA World Tag Team Championships against the NXT Tag Team Champions Nathan Frazer and Axiom. And Matt Hardy has even teased that there's more stuff to come with the Hardys and WWE, whether that's an appearance at WrestleMania, whether that's just social media stuff, whether that's more digital stuff. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but you just feel like before the Hardys decide to call it a day, and look, they're not as young as they once were, they're not the best tag team like they were several years ago, but they've still got a little bit to offer, and of course they've still got equity in their names. People still want to see the Hardys, despite Jeff Hardy being 47, despite Matt Hardy being 50. You think both will probably look to call it a career in the next couple of years, and before they do, they'll probably want to have one final run in WWE as a tag team. As far as their contracts go with TNA Wrestling, it was announced earlier this year that they put pen to paper on new TNA deals through the end of the year. I think they're one-year deals, so we're not going to see the Hardys full-time or exclusively back in WWE, possibly until 2026. So this one, once again, might be a little bit of time, but it just feels inevitable that before the Hardys decide to call it a day, they'll go back to the company that indeed made them famous. So there you go, guys. There are 5 names right there that could be current TNA stars that could be on their way permanently to WWE once their contracts expire. What are your thoughts on some of those names there? Are there any names that I've missed out? Are there any names that shouldn't be included on that list? Are there some names that are more likely than others? Let me know your thoughts, your hot takes in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button too. And as you can see, when it comes to the subscribers, we are well over 20,000 subscribers. We only just recently hit that milestone, and already we're surging when it comes to new people joining the Wrestle News universe, the WNU. So I really appreciate all of the new watchers. Also appreciate all the people that have been here since day one as well. We're only 30 subscribers away from 20,400, which would be unbelievable considering we only hit 20,000 just this week. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. We do daily news videos as well as the kind of countdown videos and upcoming watch-alongs and post-shows. A reminder, you can join the WN365 roster by clicking the join button, links in the video description, or you can scan the QR code once it's on the screen. You get your badges, your emojis, and your exclusive members-only content. Appreciate everyone that's tuned in, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.